Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. I want to particularly thank Mayor Bloomberg, who has been a remarkable leader on the issues that we're going to talk about today on helping this city recover from Superstorm Sandy, but also for his leadership in so many other areas. I also want to thank members of our task force advisory group, composed of local officials from across this region who have worked with us to get to this day. In the months since the storm, I've had the honor to chair the Hurricane Sandy Rebuilding Task Force, and I'm proud to be here back home in Brooklyn to announce our rebuilding strategy for the region. During my time as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, I've had the unfortunate role of working with families who have seen their lives torn apart by natural disasters, whether in Tuscaloosa, Minot, North Dakota, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, across the Gulf Coast after Katrina. And there is nothing quite like looking in the eyes of a family who's seen their entire world come crashing down around them from nature's wrath. But what you also see in the eyes of a family, and I saw it here across New York City and across the region after Sandy, is that families understand that we must protect our communities and we must rebuild in different ways. A storm that inflicted over 150 lost lives, displaced thousands of our fellow citizens, and created tens of billions of dollars of damage, gives us one strong imperative to make sure that we work together across this entire region, state, local, and federal, to make sure that we rebuild stronger and smarter. And I want to thank Mayor Bloomberg for his leadership. After the storm, we organized a massive coordinated response. We had over 17,000 federal responders here on the ground in the region within a week after Sandy struck. This was a testament to the way that the president had worked to rebuild the way that we respond to disasters through our National Disaster Recovery Framework. But he also understood that Sandy was of such an immense scale and power that we needed to do more. And so he created the Hurricane Sandy Rebuilding Task Force to make sure that every member of the cabinet was focused, was part of this task force, so that we could speed relief to this city, to this region as quickly as possible. And today, less than a year after the storm, we've already provided help to over 250,000 families and thousands of businesses across the region. FEMA alone has provided more than $12 billion of help. But we are not just focused on speeding relief to families and communities. We're also focused on protecting communities from the risks of a changing climate. We know how important it is that we work together with local leaders who have the vision to do that. And I'm standing next to one of our great leaders on this issue. He has put together a innovative, forward-thinking plan for this city. And we are working closely with him and many others around the region as we implement a broader strategy for the region and even the nation. One of the things that we've heard loud and clear from communities across the region is that they need the absolute best science to understand how our climate is changing. So we worked with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Army Corps of Engineers, to develop and release, for the first time ever, a web-based tool that can help a family, a small business, click on a map and understand not just what their risks are today, but what those risks look like as far as a century into the future. And to put this science into practice, we established for the first time ever a single federal flood risk reduction standard that applied to every single rebuilding project funded by the federal government after Sandy. We also launched Rebuild by Design, a competition that will connect communities across the region with the most innovative engineering, planning, and design ideas from across the world. Now, these are just a few of the 69 recommendations that are in the strategy that we're releasing today, and they will be backed up by billions of dollars. Already, the investments that we've made here in New York City and across the region have been shaped by this strategy, but the tens of billions of dollars that will come in, particularly around our infrastructure going forward, will be guided by this strategy as well. I do want to mention that this mayor, our members of the delegation across New York and across the region fought hard for this investment. It is because of their tireless efforts and the fact that President Obama fought hard for this funding that we are able to make these investments. And we will be announcing in the coming weeks billions of dollars more through our Community Development Block Grant and other funding through that supplemental. Now, I want to focus on one of the major areas of this strategy we are releasing today, which is protecting our critical infrastructure. As we saw tragically after Sandy, the breakdown of our infrastructure is not only potentially deadly to families, but it crippled the entire region and its economy. With subways and roads and bridges knocked out, customers can't visit small businesses, employees can't get to work, and companies can't rely on their supply chains. During Sandy, over 9 million people throughout the region lost power, and we all remember the gas lines and the generators sitting idle due to a lack of fuel, bringing the region and the economy to a standstill. Over my shoulder, you see a wastewater plant that stayed online through Hurricane Sandy, due in large part to the hard work of the city's Department of Environmental Protection. But other plants didn't, mostly because they lost power, resulting in billions of gallons of sewage in our waterways. The strategy outlines steps to make our electrical grid smarter and more flexible, and to protect the liquid fuel supply chain to better prepare for future storms and other threats. The strategy also charts a course for the development of a resilient power strategy for telephone and internet communications, because we must ensure that we do not lose our ability to communicate with loved ones or access critical services when it's most necessary. As we invest in our to make our infrastructure more resilient, it's critical that we think regionally about the implications and the connections between these different projects. As I said earlier, New York City has put out a far-sighted, very innovative plan for the city itself. But we all know that New York Harbor incorporates other jurisdictions, New Jersey, and we must think together about how we protect it. We also must ensure that we are establishing guidelines for all infrastructure to make sure that they not just withstand today's storms, but the storms of the future because of the changing climate due to climate change. Now, these are just a few of the steps that are outlined in our strategy to help the region rebuild stronger and smarter. We also address what we can do to provide families safe, affordable housing options and protect homeowners, what we can do to support small businesses and revitalize local economies, and how we build local government's capacity to plan for long-term rebuilding and prepare for future disasters. I am personally committed to working with all of my colleagues in the administration to ensure that each of these recommendations is implemented, because the people of this region deserve no less. And while this strategy outlines how we'll keep that commitment, it's not only intended for the states that were impacted by Sandy. Many of the recommendations apply across the nation, both to ensure our communities are better prepared for future storms and to help them respond more quickly and effectively when they do strike. This was outlined in the President's Climate Action Plan, which he released just a few weeks ago. And he did that because in this country, we simply don't leave communities to pick up the pieces alone when disaster strikes. Disaster recovery is never fast enough. But I don't think anyone would have predicted less than 10 months ago when this storm hit that millions of families would be back at work, in their homes, businesses up and running, that 97% of our beaches across the region would have been open by Memorial Day. No one would have predicted that we would work as quickly and effectively together with state and local government as we have. But we must finish the job. We have too many families that still need to get back in their homes, too many businesses that need to get back up and running. And I am committed to working closely with Mayor Bloomberg and everyone across this region to make sure that we build a future worthy of our greatest hopes and ideals. Thank you all for joining us. I want to give you a great leader on this issue, on climate change, on having built and developed a city that is better prepared perhaps than any other in the country today because of his work. And I am committed to working with his team to make sure that his vision for this city is implemented. Mayor Bloomberg?
Sean, thank you. Even in the often bleak days after Sandy struck, one definite piece of good news was President Obama's decision to put you at the head of the administration's relief and recovery effort. One of the great losses that's happened to the city in the last 12 years was you leaving, but one of the great wins for the country was you joining the Obama administration and making an enormous difference. You are the quintessential public servant. You understand what you're doing. You're smart, you're hardworking, you're honest, and you're a New Yorker. All of those things are important. We do know from lots of first-hand experience with you just how thorough and perceptive your work is, and you've demonstrated that again with the report that you're releasing today. It sets out what we all need to do at every level of government, not simply to rebuild what Sandy destroyed, but also to prepare our region for the intense coastal storms and extreme weather events scientists tell us we have to get ready for. And I'm particularly pleased with your recommendations about making our critical infrastructure, including city facilities like wastewater treatment plants that you've mentioned, and also our utilities and fuel supply and communication systems better protected and more resilient. 2 months ago, those were among the key steps our administration laid out in detail as part of our plan to make New York City more resilient. And now Dan Zarilli and his resiliency team at our Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability are working to turn those objectives into reality across the city and in specific neighborhoods, and we are right here in one of them. Sandy's storm surge caused Newtown Creek to flood portions of Long Island City, Williamsburg, Bushwick, and Maspeth. They were floods that extended for miles inland, and unless we take precautionary steps now, flooding that bad or worse could easily happen again. The good news is that we've also identified practical, cost-effective measures that will protect us in the future. They include, for example, construction of a local storm surge barrier on Newtown Creek, and Dan and his team are working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in its comprehensive study of developing such a barrier on Newtown Creek, and similar barriers at other vulnerable points, including at Coney Island Creek, at the mouth of the Gowanus Canal, and conceivably as well the entrance to Jamaica Bay. We're also expecting responses later this month to our request for proposals for creating a new and resilient seaport city along the East River waterfront in Lower Manhattan, and we're working with the City Council and the real estate industry to implement building code changes and best practices to make buildings in our city safer against extreme weather. I was down at the seaport right across the street from the fish market shortly after Sandy. I was in a store and I tried to jump and touch the watermark on the wall. It was so high I couldn't get to it. And I said to the owner of the store, all of your equipment must have been ruined in the basement, heat, hot water, electricity. And he said, no, we don't have a basement in this building. And I said, why? He said, well, 150 years ago when this building was built, they said there might be floods. Why would you put a basement in a building right next to the water? Unfortunately, we seem to have lost that lesson over a long period of time, and a lot of buildings did have their critical infrastructure damaged, and we have to make sure that that's hardened. These are just a few examples that I've mentioned, the actions that we're taking in cooperation with utility companies, the private sector, and with state agencies to make New York City more resilient. And our cooperative relationship with federal agencies couldn't be better. The Corps of Engineers is our go-to partner for implementing a range of coastal protection strategies. I was with Colonel Owens the other day out in the Rockaways, where they're building big sand berms, which will protect us, and making the beaches much bigger for the vacationing people that love the beaches. In addition to the storm surge barriers I've just mentioned, they are working with us on a lot of other projects. It is an ambitious effort that will go on until early next year. As you saw in the Rockaways, it complements what the city is doing long-term to protect the Rockaways and other shoreline communities. And we're partnering with the Interior Department and with a consortium of colleges and philanthropic groups, not only to make city and federal parks along Jamaica Bay more welcoming to visitors, but also to protect that marvelous ecosystem from all of the impacts of climate change. Of course, I have to give a big shout out to Sean's own agency, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, as the administrator of the Sandy relief funds that Congress appropriated. HUD is doing great work with our administration to help homeowners, public housing developments, businesses, and communities rebuild from Sandy and become more resilient. Before turning things back over to Sean, I just want to say, Sean, how much I support two additional priorities that you have highlighted. First, eliminating red tape while also ensuring accountability and continuing to get federal assistance to the people that need it the most. We do have to have accountability. This is all our money. It's not free money. It's the government's money. The government is us. And we've got to make sure that every penny is spent the way it should be spent if we want the taxpayer to be there the next time we need federal funds. And second, and very importantly, keeping federal flood insurance affordable for those who are rebuilding their homes to make them more secure. I said it when we presented our resiliency report in June, and I'll say it again. What a shame it would be if after all we've been through and all they've done, these insurance costs price New Yorkers out of their homes. So I'm glad that you're on board with that too, and I look forward to working with you to address this issue. And Sean, even though the work of your task force is winding down, our efforts to help those impacted by Sandy and to protect our city in the future will continue to ramp up. Rest assured, you will still be hearing from us, and thank you for everything.